Longtime Richmond sportscaster Robert Fish, outstanding freelance work as well for the Richmond Spiders, formerly Richmond Braves, does the VHSL championships for basketball on the network with Gary Hess. Joined me on the Sports Buffet podcast a few weeks back. We talk about some baseball and more. Robert had just gotten back from seeing the Nationals play some against the Yankees and Rays. Here's Robert Fish talking baseball on the Sports Buffet podcast.
Talking to Robert Fish. We'll talk some Major League Baseball. Robert, I know you got to experience the Nationals a little bit in their interleague play here recently. Didn't fare great against some of the AL East teams. What was kind of, I don't want to say what was wrong, but what did the Nationals not do as well?
Well, I think if you look at that series where they had their interleague play, they went on the road to Boston, Boston's not a very good team. I know they've been winning games of late, but they're not the best, and they're certainly not what they were. So I think they went into Boston and played particularly well, took advantage of a couple of things there. And then they went up to Toronto and had a pretty good series there. They hit the ball well, and I don't know that Toronto is that good either. But then they came back home, and it's kind of a different animal when you're facing the Yankees and the Blue Jays, and not the Blue Jays, the Rays, in the next series than when you were taking on the Red Sox and the Blue Jays. And so I think they just ran into some teams. The Yankees do things so well that you have to play pretty well. And I think for Washington, in that Yankee series at least, that was just a case of a team that knows how to win against a team that's still trying to figure it out. And Washington's won plenty of games, but the Yankees did just enough things here or there, make a play or two here or there, make the pitchers work deep into the games, take a lot of pitches, and just did enough things right. The Tampa series could have gone either way. Any of those games could have gone either way, but both the Yankees and Tampa have postseason experience, and Washington hasn't quite garnered that yet. But I think they played well in those last two series. It's just that they ran into a couple of teams that know how to win. And for that particular go-around, the Yankees and the Rays got the better of that.
With Boston, do you think it's, the talent is kind of similar to what they have had, except it's gotten a little bit older, and I know Ortiz is the only one they have left from the World Series. Do you think it's a lack of talent standpoint, or a lack of Bobby Valentine's just not a good fit with that group?
When the decision was made to let Francona go, and I understand that because of what was going on with the clubhouse and things of that nature, and they decided to bring Valentine in, my thought process, Bob, was, you're going to bring a guy in who's supposed to police that atmosphere, and yet I don't know that that's what he's known for. Here's a guy that got thrown out of a game with the New York Mets and came back in the dugout wearing funny nose and glasses disguise. If you remember that.
Right.
Ago when he was managing the Mets. And now that's not the kind of guy that's going to set a clubhouse precedent. And you saw what he did with Youkilis, and then they ended up trading him. And I think it's a little bit of both. I'm not sure that he's the best guy there to be running that club. Certainly what the ownership wanted. And then I just don't think they're as strong pitching-wise as maybe they've been in the past. I still think they have a good club, but it's just not quite as good as it's been in past seasons. And I think it's probably a mix of both, with getting used to Valentine and getting what he wants. And, he wasn't just going to be able to walk into that situation and be able to snap his fingers and make it better. And I think they're just not as strong outfield-wise either. And, if I asked you to right now, could you name the starting outfield for the Boston Red Sox, and you may not be able to do it.
Yeah,
you might be able to do it, but I don't know if someone else could.
Right, yeah, with Ellsbury's kind of been, just a MASH unit for a long time, to where he's been banged up, and, obviously J.D. Drew not there anymore, so right now I don't know if I could do it even, so it is kind of sad. Do you think they made the right move in dealing Youkilis, though? I know it's not really a popular move around Boston, but...
Well, I think if you look at Kevin Youkilis, he didn't look like he could hit much anymore. I don't know that they, they didn't get a lot for him. I love Brent Lolopouche. He was a Richmond Brave a few years ago when he was traded from Pittsburgh to Atlanta in a trade where they picked him up. And he's a good little player, but he's not a huge impact guy. The Stewart kid that they got from the White Sox is a pitcher that might do something down the road, and that's kind of where Boston seems to need a little bit of help. I guess Felix Dupont right now is probably the Red Sox top pitcher at the moment. So They didn't get a lot for Euclid, so that kind of shows you what they were able to do there. I think they probably needed to move on there. Both parties did, considering what happened earlier in the year between Valentine and Euclid. I think it's probably time to part ways, and hopefully Euclid can do something with the White Sox and maybe get things going back in the right direction.
Several people have talked about this week with the catch, and I use that in loose quotations, with Dwayne Wise when the Yankees played the Indians. Was it the worst call of the year? And I think we talked about this before about replay. How much more does replay need to come into baseball in your mind to really make the game get out of the archaic stance, but still keep human element to a degree too?
Yeah, I don't know what the reluctance to go to it is. I saw something, I think, it was either earlier this morning or yesterday, that made reference to, costs of a fifth umpire to sit up there and run the replay booth. And I just think it sounds like they're making excuses. To me, there's a call earlier this year at first base where Todd Helton fields a one-hop throw for Colorado, and he's at least a foot off the bag when the runner is called out. Those are the kind of things you've got to get right.
Right.
And if you can replay can show that that's the wrong call, then change it. You're not going to be able to do anything with strike calls and those kind of things. I think you need to leave some of that alone. I know we were talking about Valentine earlier, and he wants robotic umps or sensors or whatever. The balls and strikes, that's not going to change but so much. But when you're talking about calls that affect outcomes of games, there's got to be a way to get it right. And I don't know why there's such reluctance to go to it. Perhaps they're trying to protect the umpires a little bit. I really don't know. But, the umpires' union is probably a little reluctant with it. And as we've seen in baseball, of all sports, the unions on both sides are pretty powerful. So, sometimes that may have something to do with it as well. But we're getting closer and closer. It's kind of like this college football playoff thing. We're getting closer and closer to something happening. And pretty soon there's going to be a big call that costs somebody. Years ago we saw clearly on replay the Yankees-Orioles Jeffrey Mayer catch with Tony Carrasco right under him, and that wasn't overturned. He didn't have the power to do that, but there may be something along those lines brewing again, which could be very costly.
Well, and when people say, was that Dwayne Wise call the worst call all year, I always bring up that Dodgers-Rockies game, because that's probably one of the worst calls I've ever seen. I mean, I've heard of the old neighborhood play, but I mean, that's not even in the continent play right there, because he was way off first base.
Yeah, it was a bad call, but I don't think it was the worst we've seen, because we've certainly seen some that are comparable to it. It may have been just that it had the most recent that has the most attention to it, but there have been others. I know I've made a couple of posts referencing, the Helton call, and then another call that took place earlier in the year. So there have been quite a few, unfortunately, that seem to crop up more and more for whatever reason.
Back to the NL East real quick. When we talked about this last time, and I heard Oral Hershiser said he thinks the Nationals are going to hold to their guns and shut Steven Strasburg down when he hits that innings limit. If I was a Nationals fan, I would say why not skip him a few starts, right now, maybe in July or August, because if that guy sits in September or October, I don't know how you can look your fan base in the eye and say we're committed to winning. I mean, I understand their point of it, but, you never know if you might get back to that point.
Yeah, they did it with Zimmerman last year, and they appear to be heading for it with Strasburg. And, you're right, maybe now you head to the All-Star break, you skip a turn, back him up a little bit. I mean, they already try to find themselves, if he goes 5 or 6 innings, do they push him for a 7th? There was talk about that in not the recent start at Colorado, but the couple of starts before that, whether they should take him out or leave him in or let him go to 7th inning. And, that changes things. And I don't really know what their plan is if they shut him down. I think that you kind of get the feeling they're trying to get King Wong going, but he just has not been able to. He and Detweiler keep going back and forth in the rotation. But Davey Johnson made some comments the other day about wanting to get Wong right. No pun intended there, between the Wong and the right. But, they're trying to get him on track because maybe he's the guy they plug in if Strasburg is shut down. But it does present issues if they go into, and they will. Apparently they're going to go into August and September in the pennant race. So there's no reason to believe they wouldn't be right now the way things are going. And their offense is thriving in Colorado the last couple of days. So,
what about throwing Strasburg in the pen for a month or so?
I think they would be reluctant to do that because actually, and I think I remember John Smoltz saying this a few years ago when he was closing. Of course, our closing is much different. It's a little bit more stress on your arm because you know as a starter, you're getting ready to pitch every fifth day. You're throwing that bullpen on the third day. If they put you in the pen, and granted, he wouldn't be a closer. He might be more of a setup or not even a long relief, but a middle relief guy. But those guys get up and down. They throw so much during the game. I think they'd be more reluctant probably to do that than, and try to stretch him and see if they can get more starts out of him in September by maybe curtailing some others. They've got a decision to make. They could stick with that innings limit, but they may have to slow him down, and I don't know how they would do that. I think it's going to be a very interesting thing to watch, obviously, because the rest of baseball is going to be watching it to see how they handle it.
If the Nationals get challenged in the NL East, and I'm not giving them the division or anything right now, but where do you think their challenge comes from? Can it still come from the Phillies?
Oh, boy, the Phillies, they got Utley back, and he homered last night. But I don't know about the Phillies pitching as to whether or not, they need to get Halladay back, obviously. And Cliff Lee can't buy a win.
I would never have guessed that if you had told me he'd have 0 at this point.
And he hasn't pitched that great in a couple of outings lately. And he's getting a little bit older. But I hate to say, the challenge could come from the Braves because they appear to be holding their own. And Jason Hayward is getting hot. Jurgens is back, at least for one start. Maybe he gets it back a little bit. There's talk of the Braves looking at guys like Francisco Liriano and maybe a couple of others to make a trade for. I mean, it could come from there. That may be the best challenge at the moment. They seem to be in position right now. For the Phillies to do it, they would really have to get Utley going, who homered last night. Howard is supposedly going to start rehabbing in Florida. I think it's either Clearwater or one of those areas shortly. They've got to get him back because, they don't have a huge offensive attack right now. So, the Mets, they played well. Are they going to be able to keep that up? I don't know. And then that leaves the Marlins, who, as we talked earlier, I just don't think they can get it going. They had a great month of May, but June hasn't been so kind to them. So I don't know if they present the challenge or not. It's probably the Braves. If I had to say so right now, I'd go with Atlanta. Well,
and the other thing, too, is could you see the Phillies going the opposite direction? Because, you read some rumors and everything, and they always say, do Victorino and Hamels get put on the block? And I think if you put Hamels out there, you're really waving the white flag.
Yeah, and I don't know what their chances of re-signing him are.
Right.
But I think, they could go in that direction, especially with Victorino, a part that a lot of people could use. I don't think they'd want to trade Pence, but he could be another one. That if they do decide to go that way and go on the block, then but they have to make that decision very shortly too. I think they're trying to figure out if they get Utley back and they get Howard back, can they contend? And I think once they make that decision, then that's going to determine whether or not they wave the white flag and start trading some of those guys. But they've got some things to straighten out first. And Charlie Manuel snapped the other day at reporters when he suggested maybe they ought to manage because he got a little upset with some questions. So things are getting a little tense up in Philadelphia.
Final question for you, Robert. As always, appreciate your time. The All-Star Game is approaching soon. It's got the Home Run Derby and all that other, I would say good stuff, but to me, I don't know how good it really is. But how do you rank the All-Star Game now, and are there ways to improve the festivities or, don't even worry about Home Run Derby and things of that sort?
I tell you what, years ago I had an opportunity. We were in Syracuse with the Braves and just got a car and drove over to Cooperstown. It's not that far. It's about an hour and a half. You probably do it in that. And been to the Hall of Fame several times and look at all the exhibits. And, there's a big All-Star exhibit there that tells you that the game is an exhibition game. And when I did this, all this talk about what to do with the All-Star game, Bud Selig was upset about the tie. He had egg on his face, because the game ended in a tie. But it was an exhibition game. And then they put the home field advantage in the World Series on it. And I don't think that's particularly fair. I know that's what they're doing, trying to drum up interest. But, I thought it was, as an exhibition game, I liked it as such. That's what it is, basically. And the guys play for a couple innings, and then you just get a chance to see the game's best squaring off at center stage. And, the Home Run Derby, I never really paid a whole lot of attention to some of that stuff, but I can see why they try to go that route. They try to get interest in that, and it's fun to watch for a while. There was talk that Matt Kemp isn't going to select Bryce Harper for the home run derby. I don't have a problem with that. You'd like to showcase maybe Harper and Trout, as the young stars, but I mean, baseball's been very reluctant to do things like that for whatever reason, whereas other sports take to it much more quickly, like basketball and football, when they showcase some of those rookies. So, maybe Harper and Trout should play in the game. Maybe they should be in the home run derby, but I don't really have a problem if they're not, but it would be nice if they got a little exposure. I remember a couple of years ago they were talking about Strasburg in the All-Star game, and he only pitched about 10 games.
Right.
And that's not. And now, I also heard talk about should he be considered for a Cy Young award. I don't know if you heard that, but if you can't finish the season, you shouldn't be winning the Cy Young award either, probably.
Yeah, I would agree. And, I always thought, how the NBA used to do, like, the three-point shootout, and they just didn't have the dunk contest. They kind of had the skills contest. It would kind of be fun to see that, in baseball, maybe strongest outfield arm contest or quickest to first contest or something like that.
Yeah, have a little have a race around the bases. You just got to be careful you don't get guys hurt. And,
right.
And that's the main thing that guys get concerned about. And, the home run derby even causes players occasionally to change their swing, and guys get reluctant to get into it because they don't want to go into a slump. But it still, to me, was a fun event. I think it's the one thing they could do to that in the postseason is start the games earlier, because if we're trying to get the kids involved, if your kid's 7 or 8 or 9, he's going to bed at 9, he's not going to see all the games. He's not going to see any of it.
Yeah, I know some of the adults that have problems with that, too.
By the time they get done with the starting lineups, it's 8:45.
Right, I'm ready for bed at that point.
Right.
So,
but anyway, I think, it's just, it needs to go back to being just a fun game in the middle of the season and take all this other onus off.
Here's my idea, Robert. I think if we take over baseball, we can call ourselves the Cookie Crew and really get things going.
Yep, cookies in every press box.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, we've already helped out the writers, and everybody will love us for that reason. So maybe we've got a grassroots movement here. Robert, as always, appreciate your time. Look forward to doing it again, and go Nationals, and just go Major League Baseball. It's a fun sport.
Sounds good. Hey, thanks, Bob.